Well, hello, and good day. Today is May 16th, 2022. I'm Kurt, and this is my daily Good Life meditation. This is something that I do each and every morning, shortly after I wake up, after I clean up, and then write in my journal an entry for basically summarizing the last 24 hours. And then I proceed to do this. I sit in my chair. I go over yesterday and last night. I talk about, I recite, enumerate categorically my Good Life creed, consisting of 7 objectives and 30 principles. And then I plan for the coming day. First, last night and yesterday. Slept great last night. I was up intermittently through the night, just like twice I did wake up. It was a lovely night. I got up and watched the bloody lunar eclipse that seemed to go on all night. Watched that. And then in the first time, I think it's the first time, maybe the second time it's happened since we moved here, a full fog bank rolled in. I don't know where it came from. You know, we're out here in the desert, but a desert fog bank enveloped, it's still out there, enveloped our golf course area and our home. That was kind of nice to see. Yesterday was a good day. Bit of a challenging day, you know. Had a lot of time, a lot of free time. And like I've mentioned before, I'm suspicious of myself in free time. I don't think that we're going to necessarily get along. Ran across a quote from, or a little bit from Johnson yesterday in my book. Dr. Johnson said, he was in a letter to Boswell, he said, if you're idle, be not alone. And if you're alone, be not idle. Interesting. I ran that through the validity checker of Yumiko, and she gave that a nod. She's actually really good at vetting philosophy, even though she doesn't try to splash around in the pool of philosophy. She seems to have a better handle on it instinctively than anyone I know. And that way she is my vetting muse. I like that idea of a vetting muse. How interesting. So yesterday was an okay day. I mean, it was a good day, but I was like, all day was like being an antelope on the Serengeti, you know, eating my grass, poking my head up, looking around, waiting for ambush from something. I don't trust myself with free time. What did I do yesterday with my criteria? I did the journal entry, I made the video, and I read a lot yesterday. I counted 22 pages, which is a lot from a book like The Life of Samuel Johnson, because it's a very writerly book. You have to practically be writing the story as you read it. So yeah, I got my circle. Let's begin. 7 objectives and 30 principles, as follows. The first objective is to be always ready to die, just to have everything in a good state, including my relationships and my objectives and my affairs. 2 is to make good and effective use of time, to not let the days fritter away. 3, to develop and maintain good and sound life principles, which I'm doing right now. 4, to cultivate good emotional reactions, to react well through the day. 5, to perform good actions, to do good things throughout the day. Good things as defined and measured by my principles and my objectives. Next is to recognize my true limits and my true opportunities so that I keep it within the lines of what's reasonable and doable, possible. And then to do just one thing at a time, and to do that thing slowly and deliberately and readily. Meaning readily, meaning willingly, without reservation. If it's something worthwhile, like work, I will readily do my work. I will readily pick from the things that I have to do, and I'll choose the most needed. I'll do some prioritization. What needs to be done soonest? And I'll do that thing readily. And now my 30 principles. These are the principle of war, to always be fighting against propositions of truth or things that I already hold to be true. The principle of reason, and the sub-principles of honesty, objectivity, and doubt, which is the frame of mind and attitude that I have moving forward. Third principle is homunculus, the suggestion that I don't have a soul, but I do have a will. Not a will, I don't have that either. I do have a consciousness. More coffee. And I get this consciousness for a short while during the course of these conscious days, obviously. Then comes the Anchorhold, the suggestion that my consciousness is trapped within my head. Can't escape, won't survive me. Doomed as I am, doomed. Then the home of good and evil, right and wrong are a consequence of my conscious thought and consideration, my latching on to values. And then purpose. My purpose are three. One is to be a good husband and father. Two is to be a virtuous human being, where virtue is defined as the improvement, seeking the improvement and well-being of thinking creatures. And then the pursuit of my mission, which is to share my book, Going Alone. And the story of going alone, and namely the Good Life Creed, these 7 objectives and 30 principles. This is the story of how I went into the deep wilderness and came back with these, so to speak. And the meeting with my muse, who suggested these ideas. Just me. It's not, in my reading and my experience, the muse is nothing real. Available on Amazon or at goingalone.org if you want a signed copy. Next is the atomic principle. Everything is bits and pieces, flowing and changing and forever transforming. And then the principle of nature. Everything has some particular nature, including you and me. And it's good to recognize our own nature and the nature of others and the nature of things. And then maturity. The pirate ride. The idea that free will is an illusion. A very convincing illusion, but an illusion nonetheless. Then maturity. And the sub-principles of wisdom and fortitude, which are the approach that we have to remember our mistakes and our failures, and our successes, to do better in the future. And then the social principle. We human beings are social creatures and we need one another. It's best to do things, as Johnson said, if alone, I forgot what he said. If alone, be not idle. If idle, be not alone. Next comes public speaking, the suggestion to be very careful in my communications, very deliberate in my thinking. My utterances should use tight language and good vocabulary, understood vocabulary, not showy, or even if I have a good vocabulary, I won't use words that won't be readily understood or that will be distractions to the comprehension of what I'm trying to say. No, not show-offy words. I have a big vocabulary so that I can understand big reading. It's for my reading, basically. Every now and then, just the right word will float to the surface when I'm speaking. Typically in these types of things, when I'm doing a video, I'm not talking necessarily at anybody. That's when sometimes the right word, just the right word, will sneak its way forward. And it's a fun thing when that happens. Next comes temperance, and the sub-principles of suffering, simplicity, and apathy, where temperance is our controlled consumption of all things, especially our time, but also our everything. How much we eat and drink and sleep and work and play and everything else. We suffer a little bit when we tell ourselves no, when we restrain ourselves. And the resulting life of temperance is a simple life. And apathy is what we use to separate ourselves from the things that are outside of our control, at least separate our sense of connectedness to them or obligation. Next comes the horror show. Life is chock full of just terrible things happening all over the place to everybody at one point or another, some to a much greater degree than others. Eventually, the horror will get all of us. It's happening to our pets too, and to the animals that are under our care, under our husbandry, and to wildlife too. I heard out there by the lake last night with the window open, I heard a goose screeching. Maybe a coyote got it. The horror. Next comes, after the horror show, that which must be borne. What we have to bear, is the fact of the horror show, plus all the responsibility that we've assumed in the course of our life. And there's a lot of responsibility, especially when you choose to have kids. You signed yourself up for half your life. Boy, that's a worthwhile sell, too. Come out a better person if you fulfill that one well. Cost you everything if you don't. The horror. Next comes the principle of the Feast of Offal, which is what happens when we get upset and we tell the whole world about it. It's not a healthy good thing. It's something that we're vulnerable to do. After that comes the principle of distraction. We spend our lives distracting ourselves from that which we do not want to see, which is namely a universe without God. Excuse me, we don't want to live that life. We don't want to, be all alone in a universe without somebody that's looking after us and that will take care of us after we're dead. Sorry, it doesn't seem that's the case. Oh yeah, no, I've heard those arguments. Yeah, it's the prophecy. It's the personal relationship and attestation, and of course it boils down to faith. None of which are very good arguments. And if you've got better, then maybe you've got good reason. I haven't encountered any yet. So it seems we are alone. So we distract ourselves, with all the other stuff we've got to do. Our get up in the morning and our job, and got to make breakfast and take care of the kids and, vote, pay a mortgage, clean the house, take care of mom and dad. That was two principles: distraction and agency in the great indifference. Next comes the best seat in the house, to not want to be anyone else, or be anywhere else, or be doing anything else, but to be okay with who I am, where I am, and what I'm doing right here, right now, right who, right when. Next comes the path of wildness. It's the way upward and forward into and through new life. It's a way to break out of the sane and settled that we found ourselves in. Well, that no longer yields fruit when this ground is has been. It's time to give this ground a rest. Let it go back to nature. Move on to a new pasturage, a new life. It's tricky to do. We have to decide our path forward, collect some facts, think it over, and make a decision. And if we don't have quite enough facts to make a decision, then we can give ourselves more time within reason. But ultimately, we make a decision. And if we want to, it's okay to inform ourselves of our gut feeling a little bit. It just feels like better to go left. And off we go, knowing that left might be the wrong way. That's the risk. Speaking of risk, the next one is the risk of avoiding risk. There is risk in not taking that path. There is risk in not in giving yourself an experience, particularly in youth, that becomes our own story. Sure, you can have a story of any sort, but you can also have a story to make of your own. That's the deep risk of seeking after and creating something of our own identity and our own experience and our own story. And then the surface level risk, of education and career and, home and family, home, and saving for our old age, preparing for our old age. We can address those even more readily. There's society set up for that. It's that deep one, getting on the path of wildness and heading out after we've got our college degree at around 25, 26, heading off into the world to find ourselves. It may be a futile quest, but you may also find yourself. It's not really a matter of finding anything, it's a matter of creating it, right? It's being on the path of wildness and having the courage to go forward yields something. It changes our character. Even if we don't find anything out there, it's still the fact that we did that makes us into something else. And that's the real benefit. And then we can come back at age 30, then we can find the good job or start our career, find someone to seek after, someone to spend our life with, to make a family with and build a home, and then proceed all down the rest, heading into an old age that we can look back on our lives from with satisfaction. A life that we can be ready to depart from, should circumstances demand or suggest, not so much demand, or maybe it is a demand. Like yesterday, in the morning I went to the dog park. There was an old woman who arrived there at the same time I did. She had an old dog. Her dog was named Sunshine. Her name was Helen. I'm sure I'll see both of them again. Turns out that Helen was responsible for that dog park. She was the one 2 decades back that petitioned the city to make it. I thanked her because it's a lovely dog park with pretty trees and nice places to sit. Helen and I, our conversation went deep, quickly. And twice, we spoke for 25, 30 minutes. Twice, she brought up her husband's suicide to me. So the second time I asked some questions. It was clearly something that she was, if not interested, willing at least to talk about. It was on her mind. Her husband had had Parkinson's disease, that had debilitated him. He had been an engineer and a ready mind, worked on the Apollo project like my father did. Maybe even together. We were all living in the same place at the same time, coincidentally. Roughly the same age. So he'd been an active mind, professional. Both of them were, readers, because that's the thing that struck up the conversation. She'd noticed my book and asked me about what I was reading. So that's what started the conversation. I think that's what she latched onto, because she was a reader too. She told me that when she was a girl, her father would load her up with books from the library. And when they were living in Chicago, growing up in Chicago, and tell her she had to read everything. And she did, and it filled her mind. Anyway, her husband's disease had proceeded to the point that he realized that he was going down. After a full and rich life, the remaining time wasn't going to be lovely, pretty even, not even nice. It was going to be painful and debilitating, with the mind and the body simultaneously rioting against his well-being. So one day, while she was feeding him, giving him a spoonful of applesauce, his last meal, he closed his mouth as the spoon was presented, shook his head, and she pulled the spoon back. And he said, enough, no more. And she told me, it's just applesauce. He never ate again and starved himself to death. Now, the woman, Helen, she commented to me near the end of our conversation that perhaps her time is coming due. It was due to, although her mind is still very sharp, just something happened, or something happened at the park. I can't remember what it was. By then it was just the two of us, and our three dogs. I had my two dogs, she had hers. Little Sunshine. Every time I said Sunshine's name, she would look at me. And she commented that her time is probably due up to. I expect that that's what happens when, here's one of those fancy words, when we assuage the deep risk, when we give ourselves a life story, produce an identity early on, and a character that isn't canned or, shelf-bought. We're then more readily able to recognize when it's time to make a graceful exit, or when our time is nearly done, and to not lament it unduly, but to make our way off the stage, or to accept a graceful end, as both she and her husband seem to have done and are doing. That is one of the consequences of addressing that early risk. If she or her husband had not done so, if they had not made more of their lives than their home and their marriage and their careers, and you might wonder, well, what more is there? It's whatever you make beyond that. And for some people, there's nothing else, right? Some people have no interest in anything else. But if you wake into your early 20s and you want that something else, you sense and suspect that something else, and you don't look after it, don't try to find it, it might haunt you for the rest of your life. And when the day comes, and old age or middle age or young age, when the horror show arrives. The horror is here for a short period to take us out, or a medium or long, drawn-out ending. We might not be willing or ready to go. Instead, we'll supplicate to some higher power for intervention, or cover our ears to try to drown out the pain, the reality, change ourselves upside down and backwards to become something we aren't, to make of ourselves into the man or woman of better understanding that we never tried to do earlier in life. It's too late. We just really can't do it at that point. Have to cut our losses, and we don't. We struggle going down, all the way down. I guess there is some grace in not fighting against and going quietly into the good night, right? As Helen's husband did. He simply said, enough. It's time for a graceful exit. Or Helen, who said, I think my time is almost done. That is the result of going deep and working hard early, and going after the deep, deep risk, in addition to the surface level stuff. The risk of avoiding risk. Next is sin and damnation. There are 7 sins in my worldview: falsity, credulity, faith, superstition, dogma, authority, and gossip. Basically, being untrue, believing things that are untrue, not founded on good reason, and talking about others behind their back when they wouldn't appreciate that. And we know it. The consequence of that is damnation in the here and now. Next comes complete oblivion. The idea that when we die, there's nothing to follow, no afterlife. We don't have a soul. There is no God. There is no heaven or hell. Just oblivion. We'll never see our loved ones again. We'll never have a chance to tell them I love you. And we'll never, ever see any final justice done. Hitler got away with his sins, and Anne Frank will never be avenged. That's a sobering consideration, especially in light of the risk of avoiding risk, right? What does that say about Helen's husband's relationship with his people in his life, that he was able to just bow out, you know? Clearly his bags were packed with nowhere to go. And that's fine, if you are prepared to go nowhere. Next comes the great life adventure, which is one or more experiences, preferably early in life, mid-20s, early 20s, late 20s, the decade of the 20s. Some experience, one or more, that help to form our identity, become the centerpiece of who we are. Next comes the season of philosophy, which is a time to record what we've learned along the way, to share with others. Well, I mean, maybe they won't even give a damn, but at least you get it down, right? Some satisfaction in your own mind. And also it becomes like a sounding board. It's like as Johnson would say, it's like a pretty girl, you know, primping yourself in the mirror. So too our journal can help us to ready our mind. Next comes the bullseye aim, striving for the mark in life, trying to hit the target, but usually missing. The uphill climb, steady trudge up. Arena and utility. Life is an arena for the execution of our principles towards the aim of our objectives. Nothing is enough. Just the idea that there's sometimes less is better. And maybe not quite nothing, but it's hyperbole to the point. And then finally, the principle of fun, a reminder to have fun in the here and now, but also enjoy the hope of the future and the reminiscence of the past. Those are my 7 and 30. Now, planning for the day. I'm going into the office today, so as soon as I'm done with this, I'll read my Bible. I think I'm on Isaiah 43. Then I will, I'll feed the dogs, change my clothes, get in the car, my wife's car, I'll take that, and I'll go to work. And on the way, I'll stop at McDonald's and get a two for $5 set, the 2 sausage muffins and some coffee. Then I'll get to work, and I'm going to work it off the office today, shoes and everything. All right. Thank you for joining me. Be safe, but not too safe. Take care.